I recently had a chat with a friend who told me that his brother said he could not vote for me because I was too analytical. He felt that I was too intellectual and doubted whether that was good or even helpful for leadership. Admittedly, I made a career in academics, and therefore being intellectual and analytical comes with the territory. So I guess I am guilty as charged. The matter arising though is not whether I am analytical or not, or whether I am electable or not. The matter arising is whether we as Kenyans evaluate our leaders or those who seek leadership on the basis of their intellectual and analytical capability, and whether we should. The question is, do we attribute our current misery and wretchedness to an intellectually challenged leadership? To put it differently, is it worse to be led by thieves than to be led by fools? Welcome. This is Matters Arising. It is often said that a problem cannot be solved by the same level of intelligence that created it. As I have argued before, we have had the same leadership since independence, and one that is largely averse to and technically incapable of deep intellectual engagement. To be more precise, the Kano regime and its tragic offshoot, the Jubilee regime, have been decidedly anti-intellectual. They have had an obvious disdain for critical and analytical skills and intellectual engagement. But if we get the rulers we deserve, why have decidedly anti-intellectual regimes become our fate? Do we associate good leadership with sound intellectual skills? Like the comment of my friend's brother, I'm afraid we don't. And ironically, for a country that is obsessed with education and academic qualifications, we have a high tolerance threshold for intellectually unendowed leaders, even plainly stupid ones. I can name at least 3 governors of fairly prominent jurisdictions who are the butts of jokes of buffoonery and utter stupidity. These are our leaders, and we think it's funny. It is not. The problems that we face as a country at any given time are complex, and as the world becomes more complicated, we will need ever more sophisticated minds to help us navigate the maze of trying to build a nation in a sophisticated new era of technological innovation, multiculturalism, the rise of the ultra-right pseudo-nationalistic politics, globalism, unprecedented environmental challenges, and so on and so forth. Let us not cheat ourselves. Our quality of life is directly influenced by the intellectual quality of our leadership. When we have a country where the leadership is described as intellectual dwarfs, clueless, hustlers, D-material, dropouts, having fake bachelor's, master's, and even PhDs, we shouldn't expect that we will have our problems solved. We should expect that we will have our problems compounded and complicated. Closer home, the people of Mombasa, Nairobi, and Kiambu are increasingly learning this lesson, and I hope the people of Kenya in general will soon realize that our problem is more than tribal kingpins and thieves. Our problems as a country are not very far from the problems of the leadership of Kiambu or Mombasa or Nairobi. If you know, you know. Unfortunately, because of a shallow media that itself lacks professionals of deep intellectual insight and analysis, we have concentrated on judging our leaders on moral grounds than on intellectual capacity. This, in my view, is a strategic mistake, and I will tell you why. First, our leaders have never pretended to be morally upright, and it doesn't bother them. Saying that the current Kanu regime temporarily branding itself as Jubilee and NASA is morally corrupt is like saying that the sun rises from the east and think that you are saying anything new. How soon have we forgotten how the Jubilee government was born? In the 80s, at the ICC for crimes against humanity, ran for the presidency as a firewall against criminal and moral accountability, and they were elected. They went ahead to use any and all means to scatter the ICC process with shocking success. Are these the people I hear us trying to lecture about morality? They ran a regime founded on impunity. What is morality to them? So, endlessly harping on their moral depravity is an exercise in futility. Calling a thief is not an insult. It is a job description. The second and more important reason why focusing on morality rather than intellectual capacity of leaders is a strategic mistake may prove controversial, but it is true. Any historian will tell you that a lot of great leadership that brought great transformation in society was not particularly known for its moral fortitude. History has proven over and over again that leadership that brings about significant sociocultural change may be moral, but it must demonstrate great intellectual engagement through insight, analysis, foresight, creativity, wisdom, ideology, passion, grit, vision, and great strategy. So both are necessary, but if you must have one and not the other, you are better off with the brilliant guy than with the good guy. I do not want to give names, but think throughout global history, and you will notice that political leaders who impacted society in any historically significant way were more of brilliant wise men than they were of good moral men. Occasionally and rarely, they were both, like in the case of people like Mahatma Gandhi. Off my head, I can give you 10 names of men hailed as having been great leaders and who are in the same breath described as drunkards, hedonistic, racist, adulterous, sexually depraved, perverted, murderous, cruel, merciless, chauvinistic, egotistic, bloodthirsty, treacherous, ravenous, and so on and so forth. It is not that they were good men, and some of them were, but it's that they were brilliant men. Consequently, our failure to associate our own wretchedness with the intellectual deficiency of our leaders is a big mistake for which we are paying dearly. The consequence is that our political engagement is hardly ideological, analytical, or visionary. This, however, is not by default. It is by design. Our leaders know that they are intellectually incapable of leadership and therefore have created a political arena devoid of ideas and averse to intellectual engagement. Our politics are very deliberately reduced to insults, tribal bigotry, showmanship, mchongoano, and sheer stupidity, because that is what our leaders can handle. That is who they are. Our problems emanate more from foolish leadership and less from corrupt leadership. Ultimately, it may be good men who will get us out of our quagmire, but they must be brilliant men. The challenges ahead of us are far too complex, too deep, and too important to be left in the hands of good men. Goodness alone will not get us out. We will not moralize our way out of our problems. We will have to think our way out of our problems. And on this score, the current political class is hopelessly inadequate. We urgently need an alternative. It may be good, but it must be smart. We are wont to bemoan and complain about our situation, that we are besieged by a morally depraved political class, which is true. But morality, while necessary, is not a sufficient quality for leadership if we are to pull ourselves out of the great mess that we are in. We must also question the intellectual and conceptual skills of those who would offer themselves for the great challenge of leadership ahead. As I see it, the moral fight is lost. We are in the grip of the most morally depraved regime this country has ever seen. But that is just part of the problem. We have largely been under the grip of intellectually challenged regimes, specifically the current one, and its mother, the Kano regime, that gave birth to it. It is for this intellectual reason, and not necessarily the former moral reason, that Kenya is effectively a kakistocracy. We as a people must learn to associate the wretchedness of our situation not just to the moral depravity of our leadership, which it is, but more importantly, to its intellectual depravity. History has proven to us that great leadership is less about good men than it is about brilliant men. Therefore, worry less that we would be led by thieves. Worry more that we would be led by fools. For Matters Arising, I am Professor Wainaina.